Deepwater fans, a very happy and prosperous new year to all of you. As we bid adieu to the past year, let's dive into a fresh start with a splash of laughter. Today, we're journeying through time, revisiting some of history's most side-splitting fails. From fashion blunders that will make you cringe to technological disasters that never took flight, we've got it all. So, put on your scuba gear, folks. Are you ready to dive into the depths of historical hilarity? Buckle up! We all have that one fashion decision we regret, right? Well, imagine your fashion fail being recorded for all of history. Think about the Victorian era's hoop skirts. They were all the rage back then, but they were ridiculously large. So large, in fact, that women had to actually use special tools to pick things up off the ground because they couldn't bend over. And let's not forget about the doors. Oh, the doors. Some skirts were so wide, women had to sidle through them sideways. Talk about making an entrance. And then there were the powdered wigs in the 18th century. Yes, you heard it right. People actually wore wigs made of horse, goat, or human hair, powdered with starch. To add to the absurdity, they were often infested with bugs. Now that's one fashion trend that makes your skin crawl, quite literally. Then, fast forward to the roaring 20s. Girls, remember the flapper dresses? They might not seem like a fashion fail to us now, but back then, they caused a scandal. These dresses were knee-length, had a straight waist, and showed off a woman's arms and legs. Scandalous, right? And let's not forget about the bobbed hair. It was so short, some people couldn't even tell the boys from the girls. And how can we forget the 70s? The era of disco, funk, and bell-bottoms. Yes, those wide-legged trousers that would make any sailor proud. They started off reasonable enough, but as the decade wore on, those bells got bigger and bigger. By the end of the decade, you could hide a small child in each leg. But you know, fashion is a funny thing. One day you're in, the next day you're out, and a few decades down the line, you might just find yourself back in again. Just look at the recent revival of the 90s grunge look. Oh, the things we do for fashion. Let's move on to some technological blunders. Technology has given us so much, but not without a few laughs along the way. Let's kick things off with a concept that always seems to be just around the corner, yet never quite lands on our driveways. The flying car. Ah, the flying car. A dream that's been stuck in traffic since the 50s. Just imagine, soaring above the rush hour, wind in your hair, only to realize you forgot to put on your parachute today. That's not a parking ticket you'd want to get. Next up, we have the spectacle of the Google Glass. This piece of tech promised to bring the future to our faces, but instead, it brought us face to face with some harsh realities. Like the fact that not everyone wants to look like a low-budget cyborg, or that having a camera on your face might not be the best way to make friends. And let's not forget the price tag, $1,500 for a front row seat to the disappointment show. And who could forget the Samsung Galaxy Note 7? This smartphone was hot off the press, and unfortunately also hot off the charger. Marketed as the next big thing, it quickly became the next big thing to avoid when it started doubling as a pocket-sized firework. Nothing spices up a boring meeting like your phone exploding in your pocket. Talk about a conversation starter. But hey, let's not be too harsh. After all, these technological blunders are just stepping stones on the path to innovation. Remember that behind every successful invention, there's a graveyard of failed prototypes. And sometimes those failures are just as fascinating, if not more so. However, these blunders serve as a reminder that technology, like us, is perfectly imperfect. It's a wild ride full of surprises, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So here's to the flying cars, the Google Glasses, and the explosive smartphones of the world. You may not have nailed it, but you sure did make us chuckle. Well, they can't all be iPhones. Now let's march into some military mishaps. Even the best laid plans can go hilariously awry, especially in the heat of battle. History is riddled with tales of military strategies that, despite their well-thought-out plans, ended up in the Hall of Fame for epic fails. Let's begin with Napoleon Bonaparte, a name synonymous with military genius. Yet even he had his oops moments. Picture this. The year is 1812, and Napoleon decides to invade Russia. Sounds like a solid plan, right? Well, not quite. He didn't account for one teeny-tiny detail, the Russian winter. It's said that more than 500,000 men marched into Russia, but only a fraction of them returned, most of them succumbing to the freezing temperatures. Talk about a chilly reception. But hey, at least Napoleon wasn't alone in his blunders. Remember the story of the Trojan horse? The Greeks left a giant wooden horse as a gift for the Trojans, who, unaware of the soldiers hiding inside, brought it into their city. Sounds like a brilliant strategy, right? Well, it would have been, if not for the fact that some versions of the tale suggest the Trojans were tipped off by a couple of snakes. Yes, you heard it right, snakes. The Trojans, however, ignored these slithering soothsayers, and we all know how that ended. Then there was the time when the Austrian army attacked itself. In the late 18th century, during the Ottoman Wars, a contingent of Austrian soldiers got so intoxicated they mistook their own men for the enemy. The result? 10,000 casualties and a whole lot of embarrassment. It's clear that even with the best intentions, sometimes things just don't go as planned. These military mishaps show us that it's not just about having a strategy, but also about being able to adapt, improvise, and most importantly, keep your sense of humor intact when things go hilariously south. After all, as the saying goes, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. As we move closer to our time, the fails become funnier and more relatable. Let's take a stroll down recent memory lane, shall we? Remember that time when the medieval fantasy world of Game of Thrones was suddenly graced by a modern-day Starbucks cup? That's right, in the middle of Winterfell, a Starbucks cup casually made its debut, momentarily shattering the illusion of a world of dragons and direwolves. The internet had a field day, and the cup quickly became more famous than the Iron Throne itself. And speaking of thrones, let's not forget the infamous misspelling of Daenerys Targaryen's title on an official Game of Thrones promotional poster. The Queen of Dragons? We're sure Daenerys wouldn't be too pleased. Moving on to a different kind of stage, the Oscars. Who could forget that cringeworthy moment when La La Land was mistakenly announced as the Best Picture winner instead of Moonlight? The mix-up was quickly rectified on stage, but not before the La La Land team had started their acceptance speeches. Talk about a plot twist. Then there was the time when Apple Maps tried to send people driving straight into the middle of an airport runway. Whoops! Thankfully, no one really followed through, or we'd have a whole new kind of plane spotting on our hands. Remember the Bengate scandal of 2014? When the iPhone 6 Plus was released, customers found that the phone would bend under pressure. Literally. The phrase, "bend it like Beckham," took on a whole new meaning, and not in a good way. And how can we forget about the time when Samsung Galaxy Note 7 smartphones started catching fire due to battery issues? It was more of a hot release than anyone expected. So as we can see, despite our advancements and sophistication, we're still prone to the occasional blunder. But hey, that's what makes us human, right? And let's face it, it gives us something to laugh about. Yes, even in our sophisticated age, we're not immune to a good old-fashioned fail. Well, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of historical hilarity. From the audacious fashion faux pas of the ages, where men in powdered wigs and women in corsets thought they were the epitome of style, to the technological blunders that had us believing we'd be zipping around in flying cars by the year 2000. And who could forget the military mishaps that had generals scratching their heads and soldiers running in circles? We've seen it all, from the Trojan horse that wasn't, to the battle that was lost because the map was upside down. Talk about a major oops moment. Then there's the recent fails, those facepalm moments in our very own era that prove we're still very much capable of goofing up, despite all the advancements we've made. Remember the time when everyone thought virtual reality would replace our reality? Or when we all bought into the idea that we could learn a new language in our sleep? Yeah, we've had our fair share of laughs. But as we wrap up this journey through the ages of epic fails, let's not forget the most important thing. Remember, the only true fail is not having a sense of humor about our mistakes. So, keep the laughter alive, folks, and don't forget to subscribe to Deep Water for more entertaining content. Until next time, keep laughing and keep learning.